Okay, I'm Karima Amin, Karima Al hyphen AMIN, Karima Amin.
And if you could just start to tell us what your involvement was with SNCC,
Mm-hmm.
any information you would like us to know.
Right. You know, before I go into my involvement with SNCC, I just probably need to take you back to who I am and what I did while I was being raised. I was born and raised in New York City, not in the South. My mother was Canadian. My father was from Virginia, but did not want to go south of the George Washington Bridge. So he was born in Virginia. Um, my mother was undocumented when she came here, and she was here for many, many years, undocumented. Married my U.S. father. And then in 1959, my mother was hired to be over the payroll department of the Legal Defense Fund of the NAACP. So my mother was hired by Thurgood Marshall. I was raised in a household around attorneys. Some of the attorneys who were involved with the Brown v. Board of Education case, in addition to Thurgood Marshall, Constance Baker Motley, and really some of the giants who defended and took on cases of the students in the South. So I was raised in New York City. Um, I was used to seeing Malcolm X on the street and listening to him on 125th Street. And in fact, I was one of the very young ones. I think I was about 14 years of age when Fidel Castro came to the Hotel Teresa, and we were out there cheering him on because he had to leave Midtown because the hotel did not really want his entourage there. So I was raised looking at Marcus Garvey parades, and it was a really very rich experience being raised in Harlem, having a teacher in the 6th grade having us recite Langston Hughes. So I was raised with a very deep sense of peoplehood and the necessity to correct wrongs and to change the condition and the quality of life for people of color, especially African Americans. So I was, after high school in New York City, I went to predominantly white, I say European, university in upstate New York. I was one of 20 African Americans on any given time, any semester. But my parents taught us to go to the schools, even though I wanted to come south and go to a HBCU, but they taught us to pick up the skills and then come back to Harlem and to teach, our people. While I was in college, and that was in like 1966, right after 1965. I wanted to come to Selma, naturally, in 1965. I called my parents. They said, that's okay, we'll go. You stay in school. I started a Friends of SNCC in college. I was able to get many, of the students, non-minority students, to join the Friends of SNCC. After that, when I came back or went back to New York City in 1967, in fact, July 31st, 1967, I met my husband, who was then the chairperson of SNCC. When SNCC moved into what was considered or called the Black Power movement. So then I was really, thrown into the SNCC family, and, which I loved because, they were young, we were young at that point. Many of them had gotten a lot of experience and direction from Ella Baker, who started, was the founder of SNCC in 1960 with Shaw, at Shaw University. I've been to, naturally, the anniversaries that SNCC, hold what they hold. The Mississippi Veterans Organization, and I've been there and I've spoken there. So my experience coming from New York City is a little different, but I've been here, I've lived here since 1973, so that does tell you that, my home, I think, and I feel, is in the South. I came to Atlanta to live because of the history of Atlanta. Not only SNCC, but at that time, Maynard Jackson was coming in to running, for mayor. And it was just a really very exciting period. In SNCC, naturally, in the 1967, 68, we had to try to raise money because at that time, SNCC, a lot of the support, financial support, was beginning to dry up. Even though Harry Belafonte was still involved, his family, and helpful in raising money.
If you want to just, maybe you have any experiences, I know you were after, you made a point to say you were involved after the 65
Right.
movement, which is what most people talk about. Anything that was significantly different, especially with you being up north versus in the south, if you know of people that experienced, like I said, anything different, being in the difference between being involved in the movement in the north and maybe, for instance, here in Atlanta?
Well, I had one experience. My first experience south was to ride on a train with my girlfriend who had relatives in Columbia, South Carolina. So this was in the 50s. And we got on the train and went to Columbia, South Carolina. And it was my first experience in the South, although we did consider Philadelphia the South. And every April, my parents would take us to the Penn Relays. So, that was, one experience. And Philadelphia was South, for anyone living in New York. But in Columbia, South Carolina, it was my first experience with direct discrimination. Even though when we were growing up, we protested in New York City against White Castle for their discriminatory practices, not only with with customers, because they weren't hiring African Americans. But when I got to South Carolina, my girlfriend and I, we decided to go shopping, and we went into one of the 5 and 10 cent store. Maybe, I think it was a little upscale. And I went to try on earrings and to purchase earrings. And, I noticed a behavior from the worker, which I had not experienced in New York. And when I finally purchased something and gave her my money, she actually gave me my change and she threw it on the floor. And so I said, well, this is really different. And, I was young, so, I probably, ran my mouth a little bit. But that experience, and then we went to buy a hot dog. And we weren't allowed to go inside to the establishment. And really, I don't know how we could have even fit in there. It was really one of those storefront ones. And we went to order a hot dog. And the person said,
I'm going to stop you just to let this.
oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay. So we went to order, and we said we wanted some hot dogs. And we had some young fellas with us who were her cousins. And the the owner said to us, well, we don't serve, and you know the word that he used. And we said, well, we didn't order that. We want hot dogs, And so we stood there, and because of that, the fellows said, well, we need 20 hot dogs. And so then after they prepared the 20 and gave it, we walked away. So we said, we're not giving you our money. If you don't want to serve us, we're not giving you our money. So that experience, introduced me to a condition that existed for African Americans, which we did not have to go through. It wasn't that direct with us. It was more institutionalized, racism. And then, being in Harlem, we thought we just ruled the world. We didn't, we just knew that we could do everything and anything in there, but we were very conscious of what was going on in the South. Because my mother was over the payroll department of the Legal Defense Fund, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, she had me get my girlfriends, about 4 of them, and during the intermission at the Apollo Theater, we had cans for people to donate for the Freedom Riders, the ones sitting in, and so we weren't disconnected. It was a real connection, and a lot of that connection not only came from the way I was raised, but because my mother worked for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and I was the babysitter. I babysat for Thurgood Marshall. He used to drive me home. I can still remember the coats that he wore when he drove me home. And I babysat for many of the African American attorneys and judges. So we were from an activist family, so it was not out of the ordinary for me to become involved with SNCC. Being involved with SNCC, naturally, in the 60s, I had my natural, and I was really very, very much involved, and also in the African movement. In 1962, my sister went to the Gambia to work to build schools, and so then when she came back, it was Africa, So it was very. Many of the SNCC workers were, and many of us are not here anymore. Many of us are passing away, and it's very important to get the stories. So I'm happy that you're doing this project. I really am.
Okay. Do you have anything to say about? Are you familiar with obviously Donald Hollowell?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any experience with that, or anything that was going on at the time that you would like to share?
Right. Probably, I know information, and it probably would be better for you to get it from those who, were really around him. But no, I know of his work, and when I came here, it was very close to me. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you say it was close to you, would you say there's some type of influence from him, or just any type of connection you could think?
Well, not personally.
Okay.
Not personally. I would say that, I was a teacher before I became, I was a teacher, and then I worked with a foundation here, Southern Education Foundation, for 15 years, giving money away to work on the desegregation of the Georgia University system. So because of that, we were involved or connected with a lot of the attorneys, but not personally with him. I won't claim that.
Okay, I'm just going to call out a few few topics.
Mhm.
I know you were not in Atlanta, so if
Yeah.
you don't know anything about it, it's fine. We'll
Okay.
keep moving on to the next. Just the Atlanta student movement in general.
Mhm.
Um, any connections with people that were involved in that, or did that
Mhm.
have any type of impact on you?
Right. Well, I mean, all of the SNCC workers that I met, I mean, I was very close with them. But again, I came after that. But, people like Faye Bellamy, Stanley Wise, Cortland Cox, Charlie Cobb, I mean, all of the people with SNCC. And SNCC was based here on Nelson Street. But and I was there, in the 60s, but again, I came 67.
Most of these topics that we have took place between 1960, 1964.
Mhm.
So of course I know, you did not have any direct
Right.
involvement with it.
Uh-huh.
Do you know anything about the Atlanta Inquirer?
Oh, absolutely,
Can you
yeah.
talk a little bit about
Well,
that?
yeah, well, the Inquirer, the Daily World, the newspapers. Um, I mean, I know them. I know of it. I've read them. They were what was, I guess people would say, the Amsterdam News in New York, and the Inquirer, here. But not directly, with the people.
Okay, and then, I guess the last thing I can ask you
Mhm.
about is, this took place in 1961, so I don't know,
Okay.
you clearly probably didn't have any involvement with it, but, the desegregation of municipal facilities, so it's the U.S. Supreme Court Brown versus Board of Education.
Mhm.
I did hear you mention something about that.
Right.
Can you just talk about, where you were at the time that was going on, if it affected you in any type of.
Right. Well, I'm old, but not. I mean, I was a smaller child then. Well, not that small. Again, in my connection, and I would say I went to a camp in New York City. Well, it was Port Jervis, New York. Um, and in addition to our having counselors from the South, the camp for one summer brought the Little Rock Nine, some of the students, so they were campers with us. So we were able, and they came to my home. We welcomed them there, and we were very, friendly with them. And so